Welcome, everyone, to the Heart of the Artist interview that I have been wanting to do since the day that I came up with this concept. The day that I came up with this concept, and I said, I want to interview my friend and dope poet, mentor, amazing chick, Shane Maynor. I am so glad you're here. Welcome to the Heart of the Artist.
Yes, it took me long enough, but I made it. I'm here. Thank you so much for this platform and for allowing, these incredible folks to get up here and share their story and encourage and inspire others. So I'm honored to be here.
It is a testament to how busy you are that it has taken this long. And I have to preface this by saying I know Shane really well. We're friends on the regular. So the very fact that I couldn't get my own friend in here to interview shows you how busy this woman is. You're just that busy. So
Yeah, I facts. I can't deny that. All good stuff though. I feel like, we talk about overwhelm, but there's also underwhelm when you're not doing enough, that fuels your heart. So it's like, yeah, it's a lot, but it doesn't feel like a lot. So grateful for that.
so I heard that you just got back from a little vacation. Yeah.
I did. I went on my first cruise, me and Daniel, my partner, and it might be our last cruise. um, I am a very, I'm very extroverted. I love people, but like if you're wanting to go relax, a cruise might not be the thing for you. I was not prepared for the overwhelm of people and their stories, and even as a poet and someone who really loves to connect with others and hear their stories. By the third day, I was like, I don't care how juicy the tea is. I don't care if somewhere in your history you had an affair with Prince Charles. I don't care what it is. I don't want to know. Like I was so exhausted, and I'm glad I did it. I'm glad I went and experienced it. There was some beautiful moments as well. So now our goal for summer vacations is to go to the beach or like go to the mountains and camp and just get away from folks and kind of be in our own little space to recuperate and rejuvenate from all of that work. So
I know that you were joking about a situation that kind of got you triggered. I mean, you were joking about it and laughing about it, but it sounded like there was some real underlying trigger for that moment. And hearing you tell that story, it kind of reminded me of your poem where you start out singing "Promise Me, Son," um, your dad poem. Was that fun for storytelling, or was there a real moment of triggering there?
yeah, so there was a real moment, but it wasn't. It's weird when I'm in certain situations, right? Like I think location matters. So those that don't know, what happened was we attempted to go find the Queen's Stairs in the Bahamas, and Daniel had wrote down directions. However, his directions were incorrect. Okay, so we ended up deep into the Bahamas where we clearly were not supposed to be, and it was very eye-opening. It was very rough. A security guard had came out of nowhere and was like yelling at us, like, "You don't need to be here. You need to leave immediately." Two guys came out from their yard and started like walking right behind us, right beside of us for a very long time, and that was the moment where like I like the it felt like there was a threat. I'm not going to say that there was because bias. I don't know that. Like when I got back, I was thinking those two gentlemen could have been like, look at these poor tourists out here where they are not supposed to be. Let's escort them down the street. Now, the reality of that being, the case is probably slim to none, but that's a possibility. But in my body, there's a threat. And I was very surprised at how fast I reverted back to my upbringing. I grew up in a lot of violence, and I was very violent as a young teen and even into my young adulthood. And I was very surprised that even though I've done all this healing, and I've come this far, and I was very shocked at how fast I reverted back into like, all right, Like if you coming at me, you better have a gun because we gonna be bleeding in these streets. Like I die for mine. Like, you know, and I just immediately like my saunter changed, my body language changed, like everything changed. And it took me a minute to come back from that space. But from that, and of course, nothing happened to us. So for those, you know, of you who are concerned about, you've heard stories that the Bahamas aren't safe. Listen, we were in like the thick of it, you know, and we got back to the boat okay. But the lesson in it for me, not only just being aware of like most of the people on the island are living this way, but also for myself, like, wow, even though I've come this far, like it is still in me. It is still a program that I can tap into in my body. And I guess it was just really shocking that it was just so easy to go back into that mindset. And I mean, it's not something that I'm like uncomfortable with. Like, I haven't had a chance to, you know, talk to my therapist about it yet. Well, I'm talking to her this week, but um so it's not like it bothers me that it was that quick to revert back to that, but it is very like, oh wow, that's still there, that's still a part of me. So
You still have that lizard brain, and he is not a Disney lizard.
no. No, that's a very good metaphor. Analogy.
Um, would you like to share? So this is one of the things that I love about your poems is that they are so narrative about your life that someone can listen to one of your poems and really get a sense of who you are, where you've come from. You know, in the Heart of the Artist interviews, you know, I want to get to know the person underneath. We listen to your poems and we know so much about you, right? Most people, I'm like, okay, can we pry the lid off this can and look down in there? And you're like, yep, here I am. I am an open book. Would you like to share one of those?
Yeah, I feel like the the Promise Me Son poem, I feel like that specifically is for like certain spaces where other children um, who grew up in that might have the same fear of ending up in the same situations as their parents. And I've done a lot of work around that. I'm not so much afraid of that anymore, but I can share that poem to give some perspective on it. Um, it's interesting with poetry because the book that I'm working on right now, Raised by Wolves, I'm trying to tell the whole story, the good and the bad. And with poetry, when it's just one poem, you only get like a certain snapshot of the thing because you're trying to capture that moment or capture that meaning, right? So I say all that to say that the poem is rough and it is about like some really wild stuff that I experienced growing up. However, right, uh, I'm so proud of where I come from. I'm very grateful for my background. I got to live a life that many other children were not able to. I got to travel the country, see different things. It was like yes, I was in danger and also I was safe. Like these two things can exist at the same time, if that makes any sense, you know? So I just want to preface the poem by saying that because it's kind of a brutal poem. But yeah, I'll
And,
share it.
yeah, and if you feel like there's something different, you know, that would help our viewers understand kind of that basis of you. One of the beautiful things that I remember talking to you about is the sense of who you were as a young woman. You know, you went through all this trauma, but the thing that really stood out to me from conversations we've had is this sense of this is who I am that you got from your mom and your dad.
Yeah, I those poems, you know, they do exist, but I feel like um the Promise Me Son poem, I feel like really showcases like that level of violence and how that became a language and how it is programmed in the body. So yeah. Okay. So
Yeah.
when I was younger, there was this song that my parents would play in the car traveling all the time. And this song is an old country song. And the lyrics go, promise me, son, not to do the things I've done. Walk away from trouble when you can. Now, it won't mean you're weak if you turn the other cheek. I hope you're old enough to understand. Son, you don't have to fight to be a man. My dad was one tough son of a bitch. Came up from nothing, deep in the mountains of Chuckey, Tennessee. A real mountains man, a real cowboy. That's why he named me Shane. And I was a daddy's girl all the way. Y'all, one time when I was 8, I saw him stab an undercover cop in the eye with a hunting knife during a poker fight. It was wild. I even got to see part of the trial. When I told this story just as passionately to my half sister, she said, oh my God, no child should have had to have gone through that. That's when I realized the memories I thought were badass were trauma, explained years of my own violence. When I was in high school, I wanted nothing more than to feel the clink of teeth across my knuckles. Violence became a language, was more than just a habit. My dad, he had this habit of walking into a bar and yelling, which one in here is the biggest, toughest son of a bitch? And one night, y'all, a man told him he'd go get his gun and we'd see who the biggest is. The way I heard it is, my daddy calmly nodded his head, walked to his truck, got his gun, and shot the man dead. I didn't get to see that trial, but I remember daddy being gone for a while and mama being afraid. You see, in our family, fear shows itself as rage. Plot twist, that man actually got off on self-defense, but they say there's still another body buried somewhere in the mountains. Years later, I found out my biological mother stabbed her ex-husband, and I'll tell y'all a secret. I'm terrified. I'll end up in the same situations as my parents, trying to untangle trauma from tradition, generational curses from lineage. I really need God to respond to my text messages because I got one hell of a question that might carry hell with it. If a person is capable of murder, do you think it's hereditary? They're doing studies on the murder gene, how much of my DNA could be linked to a DOA and RIP. I got trust issues with my cell tissues because there's still a part of me that feels weaker without the anger, thinks that if someone is upset at me, they're coming. Because in my family, that's exactly what it meant. So what's the difference between paranoia and threat? Is it a lie to cry wolf if you actually believe the wolf is coming? And the irony is, most days I feel like the wolf thrown to the humans, trying to live in a world that operates the opposite from how I was raised, look myself in the face and not see a cascade of caskets, my pupils, 2 barrels in front of 2 itchy trigger fingers. Plot twist. The kid born into the gang gets to go free because daddies don't survive long in this environment. I just have to worry about the blood backfiring in my bloodstream, handed down the haunting of all the men my daddy killed till it becomes a prayer I sing for peace. So promise me, son, not to do the things I've done. Walk away from trouble when you can. Now, it won't mean you're weak if you turn the other cheek. I hope you're old enough to understand. Honey, you don't have to fight to be a man.
That piece never gets old.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah.
you for
And I mean, it's something that I had to work through, like, and it does become like this language. And I always tell my students too, I'm like, the problem with violence is that it's effective. That's the whole problem. Because if someone's running their mouth and you go pop them in the mouth, they're going to shut up. And it works, but it doesn't work out for you. And it doesn't solve anything in the long run. It doesn't bring us closer together. So it's like, it's a whole nother layer of it once you're able to be honest with yourself too, and realize like, oh, wow, it's like, okay, prior to whatever conflict you're in, I would just handle it this way and it was handled. And now it's like, gosh, now I got to figure out how to compromise and what to say and, figure out the needs of everybody. And it just feels like such like this daunting thing that you don't know how to tackle, when this previous program that was running in your body was so efficient. But in the long run, it's not. And I it's taken me a long time to unravel that and unlearn that. And I don't know, I'm grateful because it allows me to go into spaces where, you know, there is heightened violence and escalation and things like that. And to be able to communicate in a way that is relatable and, you know, get folks to see what they need for themselves to move forward and to realize that they don't need it and that there's a better way for everyone involved. And I do believe empathy can be taught. I've seen students who have zero empathy and have, you know, no remorse end up, you know, using the money that they got for their art piece selling and putting it towards another student who needed a coat, you know, like a complete turnaround. And most of the time the reason for a lack of empathy is survival mode. It's just straight up survival mode. They don't have the capacity to think of someone outside of themselves when they're just trying to live moment to moment, day by day. So it's been an incredible journey, and I'm very grateful because it allows me to go into these spaces and build, you know, a space within it for folks to get free and to be healed. So.
Absolutely. And that's exactly why I wanted you to do that poem, so that people who watch this will understand. When you were talking about the cruise and how you reverted to lizard brain, that's real. You know, that came from your childhood where you did have to employ those strategies in order to feel safe. You know, that's not just big talk. That's like, you know, 4 feet 11 of, you know, kick ass.
Yeah, and when you little, you gotta be vicious because you know you compensating. You gotta be you gotta be over the top, you know. So
Do you remember that movie, The Men in Black, where he gives Will Smith the tiny gun?
yeah,
Remember that? This is called the noisy cricket. You're the noisy cricket. And it makes the
yeah,
biggest, right? The noisy cricket goes off and the whole wall explodes. You know, you're the noisy cricket. Um, but I love what you said. And I think that that just rings true in my heart and in my mind, that, you know, when you're working with you know, the kids, that you have whatever word, whatever label you want to put on it, authenticity, street cred, whatever it is, you have that because you've lived that, and they know that you're speaking the truth to them about having walked that path. And you're probably one of the few people, you know, who can really do that with them.
yeah. I
Um,
think it definitely takes a layer of honesty, and I've been hired to go into spaces and observe classrooms or facilities to see like, well, why is our program, you know, like having all this success and these other ones aren't. And most of the time, what I see is like there is a lack of like raw, I mean, really going there, honesty with the facilitator. And there's this separation where the facilitator is like not in it with the people. You know what I mean? And like there are certain things if you allow yourself to be honest about, like violence being effective, you know, you wouldn't expect that from a facilitator coming and being like, I get it. Yes, it works. And it's so tempting to just be like, I'm just going to beat you up and, you know, or I'm going to show up at your house. And everybody then is like, oh, wait, so it's okay to feel this way? And you're like, yes, because logistically that makes sense. Like, why would you want to go around your ass to get the elbow, you know? And then everybody's like, oh, so it's safe for me to express these things. And like, you can't have a breakthrough unless you can be honest, you know? And that's the facilitator's job, is to show what that looks like and to give permission by being vulnerable and honest, you know? And so that's the biggest thing I see is like facilitators aren't allowing themselves to really speak to these stigmas and these things that we're like, oh no, I can't share that, or and it just builds the belief of I'm broken, I'm unfixable when we do that, you know. So
so that is a great lead in, I think, to if you want to take a minute to explain who Guerrilla Poets are, what we're doing in the community, and the group, the populations that are being served.
Yeah, so Guerrilla Poets is our nonprofit, and we provide art, music, and poetry programs in underserved areas. So we work in crisis centers, we work in detention facilities with both youth, teens, and adults. We also work with some elderly folks as well. So we're in shelters, schools, facilities. We're everywhere where we're needed. I like to consider us mercenaries of hope. And it's just incredible because like every month we see the results that the arts do change lives because it's the perfect vehicle for you to explore those things in a way that's creative and even sometimes playful and fun, even if it's like really heavy, difficult emotions or experiences that you went through. Like it is the vehicle that can help you go there, suss it out, figure out, okay, this is something I want to carry with me in my history, and this is what I want to let go. And it just is, it's perfect for empowerment and for figuring those things out and also releasing them as well. So we work with Time Out Youth in Charlotte. We work at the Mecklenburg County Detention Facility. We work with Promise Resource Network. We do poetry workshops on mental health. And typically, what we do, whether it's visual art, poetry, or music, we try to incorporate a personal development tool with it because you can do art all day long, but if you're not asking the right questions for that self discovery and that excavation to happen, then you're not really like hitting through that barrier, So we partner it with, personal development tools so they can really be empowered and figure it out for themselves.
Um, you're really proud of the kids from Henderson Independent. Can you explain, first of all, what makes this group of kids special and unique, and then talk about why you're so proud?
Yes, I would love to. Super, super proud of them. As you can tell, I'm beaming. Uh, so, our Henderson students are at an alternative school, which we're trying to change the language on that and start calling them independent high schools. But these students are in foster care. These students are getting shot at every week. Like they're like in the thick of it. They are living it. Uh, there's gang activity going on and stuff. So they've got a lot of challenges, lack of resources. I mean, just really, really struggle busing, but they are so engaged. Well, let me not say and they are so engaged and they are so creative and so hopeful and so resilient. We've had students in our program from that school, which is located in Salisbury, North Carolina, go on to start their own nonprofits because they're searching for that sense of community and they want to give back and they want to, you know, um, they just know what it is to live it and want to be the person they didn't have growing up. This year, so typically what we do is we do poetry and art with them all year long, and we're there every week. And at the end of the year, at the school year, we do a showcase, and we've done a play at one of the theaters where it was on incarceration that was really powerful. We do art shows. They get to sell their art, so that helps them financially as well, because they get 100% of that. They get the money that from their art. Uh, we've done we've done poetry shows, based off of, the end of the year work that they've created. But this year we did a horror movie. And I'm a huge horror movie fan. If you can't tell, there's a Friday the 13th poster in the background. Um, but I asked them, they didn't like this year. I was like, do you want to do a play? And they're like, nah. And I was like, do you want to do like a poetry slam, like competition or a poetry show? And they're like, nah. And when I said horror movie, everybody was like, yes. And I was like, okay, well, it has to like mean something. We can't just be running around the school trying to eat each other. All right. Like, what's the meaning going to be? And we came up with like trauma and how, because horror, one of the reasons why I love horror is not only because of the skill set you have to have in order to effectively, build tension, cause someone to have a physical response from whatever it is they're viewing or experiencing. like that, it takes an incredible skill, which is why most of the movies in the Criterion Collection are horror movies. They revolutionized film. It just takes so much skill and storytelling to be able to do it. But it also helps you process trauma, and it helps you look at the either the dark sides of society or the shadows within yourself, and face them in a way that is fun and creative, a lot like the arts do. So it was really incredible to be able to take things like addiction paired with possession, and like being bit by a werewolf and assault, and like, am I a monster now, or can I be the hero? Like taking these things like peer pressure and zombies, and like expressing them through a fun and creative outlet as horror, it was amazing, absolutely amazing. And it ended up, of course, because we're all silly and there was a lot of sugar involved, it ended up being like a comedic horror, which I think was needed because we were focusing on some pretty heavy stuff. But it was also respectful in the data it gave and in the stories that it gave. And it got picked up by MHA, Mental Health Association, and it was shown at one of the big theaters in Charlotte, Independent Picture House, and it was shown at Shug's in Salisbury, and like everyone who has viewed it has just been blown away and just so inspired by them. And I mean, we did it on a zero budget. We did it with like, no resources, one crappy little Rebel camera, and 4 hours of filming, and it just came out to be one of the most coolest things I think we've ever done. And one of the funnest. And yeah, I'm just really, really, really proud of them. And I can't wait to do the next one. And I was shocked when we talked about it. The next time we came into class, one of our students who was very like quiet came in and handed me a whole script. And I was just like, wow, like y'all are invested. I mean, they helped direct it, they helped with, set design, costume. I mean, all of it. Like we co-created it, and they really spearheaded it. And it was just so amazing to see them do that and take ownership over it and be proud of it. Like they were proud of it.
The messaging on this to me just cannot be understated because this is a group of kids who go to the school that is the school. If you've not been able to find success in a school with like a traditional setting, right? This is another environment. It's a different environment. And some people, obnoxious people who don't know any better would say, oh, that's where the bad kids go, right? Well, you know what those bad kids just did? They just kicked ass, man.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, and all of it's trauma. I mean, all of it's trauma. Like the behavioral health issues that they face, that they have, they're just trying to do the best they can, man. That's it,
Absolutely.
And I've been in several different spaces. I've been where the rich kids go. I've been where like, the kids who have no resources, nothing, And the one thing that I've seen is that's been pretty eye-opening for me is the same mental health issues apply. It's just one group has resources and the other one doesn't. And when you don't have resources, crime happens. Crime happens. What else are you going to do? I mean, we had a student who, his mom couldn't afford the medication. She was going to die, and Burger King ain't going to pay for that. So he went and he robbed houses. I mean, you know, so
Society's not set up to take care of people the way they need to be taken care of.
right. And a lot of these students, like, you're walking down the hallway and their sleeve falls off. And a gang comes up and says, hey, we'll Clovia feed you because nobody else is. We'll offer you protection. And to me, yes, it's grooming because you're just going to take the fall for the person in front of you, But at that time, it's like, oh, well, somebody loves me, someone sees me, someone cares enough to provide for me. So,
And validation,
and
validation.
validation, absolutely.
That one of the best parts about the movie was the outtakes and watching the kids engage with each other in that natural way that shows how invested they were as a team, like
Yeah.
invested in each other's success. That was amazing to watch that and see that and feel that energy coming. And huge props to the principal of the school, Alexis Cowan, for allowing the school to be used.
Yes. Because we couldn't go off school. We couldn't go like off location. So everything had to be filmed in the school. Mr. Cowan has done incredible with that school. To put it into perspective, I've been doing the Henderson program for like 7 years now. When I first started, teachers were being assaulted. They were being tied to their chairs and being physically assaulted. There was one incident where students threw a couch through the second story window. There was, I mean, just wildness, y'all. It was the wild, wild west out there. They didn't have an art teacher for years prior to me being there because a 10-person fight broke out in her classroom and she was pregnant and got punched. Like, I mean, just chaos, chaos. And now I can like count on my hand how many things that I've experienced at the school throughout the school year that are like, oh, this is an unsafe situation, as opposed to like every single week going in, there's something happening, you know? So shout out to him for real, for like really getting staff that care, who aren't burnt out, because that's a big part of it. I try to tell the teachers, like, you don't want to hear this, but if there's an issue in your classroom,
You're the problem.
you're the problem. Like, because they don't treat
Because
us that way. Like, the you
no,
might want to look at what's going on here, you know. But yeah, like, and that camaraderie that they have, and like behind the scenes, like I don't want to, I'm not going to exploit any of my students, but there was some serious things that happened behind the scenes between certain students, and knowing how to be accepting of those things, be non-judgmental, and know it doesn't excuse whatever they did, but it does explain it, you know, and being able to explain that and get everybody to still be on the side of championing for each other.
right?
That was really beautiful to witness to this year. So thank you for pointing that out, because that was huge for them as well.
Yeah. To be on the side of growth, you know, I mean,
Yes.
that's amazing. Absolutely amazing. I have to believe that, one of the reasons that they respond so strongly to you, not only because you're just boss and amazing, but because I think in some way, I'm guessing they probably are like, maybe see some aspect of themselves in you in the future, like a future them. And that you give the possibility because you came from a rough background and you're very open and very honest about it and your journey. And I think that I've got to believe that they have to look at you and go, wow, she got out. Like, she is showing us these are the tools, and I'm going to help you develop these tools for yourself. Here's my toolbox. Come look in my toolbox, and I'm going to open up this toolbox, and everything that you see in here, you can have for yourself. And we can teach you how to have that tool together. And I'm invested in you, and I'm walking with you.
I think if that is, and the reason why I say if is, if that is, well, I'll explain that in a second. If that is happening, I think it's definitely happening on a subconscious level. Um, it's showing up through action. You know, Brene Brown says, you know, trust is built in the smallest of moments. It's that being shown over and over and over and over and over again, and subconsciously probably planting that seed. But the reason why I say if is so many of them don't believe in a future. And we have succeeded if by the end of the school year, they believe that they can make it to the next year, you know? So I don't know if it's so much that in the forefront of their minds as it is, it's okay for me to show up how I show up.
Yeah.
You know, it's okay to not be okay. And if you do an art piece where you are just tearing yourself apart, where you are just expressing some of the darkest things that you could ever express, I'm not going to tell you to redo the art piece. I'm not going to tell you that, like, no, this is wrong, you shouldn't feel this way, or like, you're better than this. I'm going to ask, where did this come from? I'm going to ask, like, why do you feel that way? What do you need? What do you think you need to do? All of those like little introspective questions that shows like it's totally reasonable and understandable for me to feel the way I feel. So it's like that validation. And I think it goes back to, you have to feel seen and heard in order to then have hope, you know, if that makes any
Absolutely.
sense. But
Absolutely. I think, and I have not been in class with you, so I have not seen this magic happen firsthand. But just the concept of someone going from fear to vulnerability is like, that's one end of the rainbow to the other.
yeah,
That's a journey.
yeah,
And that you and other members of the GPs are facilitating those types of transformations for all of the populations that the group serves, is an absolutely incredible thing. And you came up with it. Can you speak a little bit to how the GPs came into existence?
yeah. And just to piggyback off what you said, I just recently went and did a series of workshops with GSAs in the Rowan County area. And Mary, who is on the board for Salisbury Pride, went with me because she was like, I got to see this. I got to see how you do this. She's like, I don't know how you're going to get a poem. You're going to get an art piece. You're going to connect with these students in 45 minutes. I don't understand. Like, I'm worried about this program. I want to come and see like what happens. And I was like, come on. I was like, and I'll never forget, at the end of the first workshop that she came to, she was like, I have never seen, like, I did not believe prior to today that you could reach students with under an hour. And she was like, and it just happened so natural and it just happened so fast. And I was like, I told her it's all about permission giving, and like you coming from a place of service. If you always come from a place of service and you always come in from a place of, it does not matter what you did, it does not matter how you show up, you are worthy, you are loved, then and you show up authentically and you give a little pieces of yourself, and you give, you know, the spaces for choices, like you give, autonomy to who you're servicing, it's going to happen. You can connect, you can like have that transformation within an hour. Like there is a way to do that. And all of the GPs can do it, and it's so freaking like I'm so grateful. Like I have an Instagram live where I actually had to pull over to the side of the road this year, and I was just sobbing in my car because I was like, if you would have told me that my life would have turned out like this, that I would get to do this, like I wouldn't have believed you. Like, and I'm just so grateful for it, for the group that we have, for the work that we do. GPs got started back in 2012, and I was reading a poem at an open mic in Lincolnton. And I don't know if you've ever been to Lincolnton, North Carolina, but don't go. Okay, it's don't go. There's not many places that I feel like can be burned off the map and I'd be okay with it. LinkedIn's one of them. All right. So I'll go out of my way just so I don't have to drop through LinkedIn. Also, my ex-husband's there, so that might have something to do with it, but whatever.
Your
Uh,
ex-husband's in Lincolnton?
yes.
My
Yes.
ex-husband's from Lincolnton.
See, if that don't tell you enough right there, everybody, stay the hell away from Lincoln. All right. Don't go to Lincoln, North Carolina. You're going to end up married in an awful relationship. It's not going to work out for you. All right. Just stay the hell out of Lincoln. They're cute, but they mean. All right. They cute and they mean. All right. And just stay out of Lincoln. But I was there and was part of a poetry group called Poetry Lincoln that me, Morgan Depew, and my poetry mama, Devonna Wyatt, had co-started and everything. We had an open mic there. And I was on the mic and I was reading a poem called Sitting Beside Death on the Fence with a Pack of Cigarettes. And it was about suicidal ideation. And it was about me and death arguing. Like I keep coming up to death being like, take me, take me. And death is like, you getting on my damn nerves. Okay. So we got to figure out something else to do because I'm sick of this shit, you know? And so I got done with the poem and I got off the mic, and this elderly man came up to me and he threw his arms around me and he was crying. And he said in my ear, I didn't know that there was poetry tonight. I just came to get something to eat and I plan to go home and take my own life. And I want you to know that because I heard that poem, I'm not going to. And that was the first moment that I realized, wow, like poetry can help me, but also by me sharing my story, it can help others. And I stayed in contact with him for a while after that. And the very next day, I started Guerrilla Poets. And when I started, I put this call out on social media, and I was like, I got this idea. I got this idea for a poetry group. Hit me up if you're interested. And I had some folks like contact me, but then when I told them what we would be doing, they were like, "Oh, I don't know," because we started out as a flash mob. So we were going into Walmart, we were going into Best Buy, we were going on a light rail in Charlotte, we were going like to all these public places doing like poems, you know, and they were like, I don't know. But eventually I got a group of like 5 of us together, and those were the founding members. And we did flash mobs, and it was beautiful. And then since then we've grown into doing, you know, we've gotten in these spaces that are like detention facilities, crisis centers, shelters, schools, and we're like, okay, can't really do flash mob poetry anymore because I can't get arrested, you know. um, but we do perform more for organizations, and we do sometimes when we're feeling a little spunky, you know, we'll contact a location to ask their permission to flash mob. So we will do that. We've also gone out on the street and just did ciphers and stuff on the street. But we've moved more into like going where the need is, which has always been a part, you know, of our organization. Just being like, you know, your average open mic, people are there because they know the power of poetry, but the guy getting off at the mill doesn't. The single mother on the light rail that's working 3 jobs, you know, she's not going to show up at the open mic. So how do we get to these folks and show them the power of the arts, you know? And so that's why we start out as a flash mob. And we had to make a decision early on, like, are we going to be a movement or are we going to be an organization? And can we be both? And what does that look like? You know, so we've tried to always straddle that line of movement and organization. And I think that's one of the reasons why we've kept grassroots. So we don't have to do what these other major nonprofits are doing, where that now all of a sudden they're focused more on the money and not the programming. And then it just becomes very commercial and the impact isn't as strong and everything just kind of falls apart behind the scenes, you know? So
Absolutely. I remember when I first met you, which was one of the Writing for Wellness workshops. It would have been around probably I think it was summer of 2020, actually, I want to say. And I remember you talking about something about going out at night and something about some street lights. And I think that maybe I don't remember if this is a story that came from the time when you were still married, and that was a very tumultuous relationship, or maybe it was post that. But I just remember you talking about these, like the street lights and being out in the street and the street light. I don't know, but I was struck by your drive, you know, even then. Can you talk a little about going from post-divorce trauma and just being in the vortex of what the hell is going on with my life to coming out of it and being able to actually found a functional nonprofit to do good work in the community? Because that's a
wow.
huge transition.
Yeah, wow. No one's ever asked me that question. I think probably because they don't have that experience. But like you going through a marriage, like you know that like when you go through a divorce, especially one that's scary, right? That where there's abuse involved and things like that, you are completely lost. You know, for most of the women lose everything. I know I did. I couldn't stand to be in that house within 5 minutes, I felt like I was going to vomit. So I left most of my stuff. I mean, I was starting from scratch. I was ashamed. This marriage had failed, I felt like a fool. I didn't want to go back home because that felt even more like a failure. Uh, I mean, you're just starting with nothing and then you're hurting and then, you don't know what to do. You feel like you're the monster. It, now I will say I did have a lot of fun though. Being divorced does have its perks, you get to be a little wild in these streets and you get to figure out what you want, what you don't want, and you get to be a little sassy, you get to be a little cold-blooded, and like, okay, man, watch out now. Revenge. I'm out here for revenge. But there's also like people get hurt and like I'm not proud of some of the things, but I think that it was important for me to understand what I wanted, not only in a relationship but also what I wanted from my life, because I didn't think I could. I didn't think I was worth, and it all goes back to that sense of worth. Like, am I worth something more than this? I mean, so, I mean, it took me a while to experiment, to unpeel all the layers that relationship had painted me, deal with my own, you know, come whatever you want to call it, coming to terms with how I reacted, because it takes two. I'm not above saying that. There was some stuff that I did that definitely escalated things, you know. Coming to terms with like, my role in it, my actions in it, and figuring out what do I want my future to look like when it comes to my relationships. And the poetry aspect is very interesting because it also made me realize there is no way that I could be with someone who isn't an active creative, because they just don't understand the creative journey. They don't understand needing privacy to work. They don't understand going to, like, let's be real, some of these poetry shows, I mean, Brandy, I mean, Whisper, I mean, like, the you don't go on till 11 o'clock at night, and you need a partner who's like going to trust that you're not out here running around, that you're doing work, and someone who also believes in the work as well, you know who can support you in the ways, like, what does support even look like, you know and I do believe that no one gets there alone. It took a village. It took all of the different members who came through Guerrilla Poets, who I consider my band of brothers. Like, it took all of them. It took friends, family. It took relationships that I had to navigate to figure out, what does leadership look like that's healthy? What does support look like that's what I need for myself? And I think, really, to just like sum all of it down, is just giving yourself the permission to experiment and figure it out as you go, because you're not going to know what's right until you do the thing and then go, whoa, whoa, went a little too far this way, let me come back this way. And being okay with that. And that, I mean, that's a journey in itself. Hopefully that makes sense. I feel like I went a very long-winded way to answer it, but you made me think about a lot, because I haven't thought about that playing a factor. But it definitely does. I mean, you're looking at my early adulthood. I mean, those are some very significant years. I mean, I was married 19 to what, 24? I mean, that's growing up years right there. Yeah. Wow, thank you for that. I never even Now I got something else to talk to my therapist about Thursday. Thank you.
But to take it back even further, I remember a conversation that we had, and we were talking about your parents. And I remember asking you, did they teach you to never, ever, ever give up? And like, I mean, your answer was like, there was no hesitation. You don't give up.
Yeah.
Like that's just not, that's not even in the lexicon. That's not even in the vocabulary.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, because me and Daniel had a conversation. We've been having some really beautiful conversations lately. And one of the most recent ones has been like the unspoken rules you learned growing up. Like, they didn't have to be spoken, but like the unspoken ones. and like the difference between the two. And like some of the things that were drilled into me, both spoken and unspoken, is independent. You cannot depend on a man. You have got to be able to stand on your own 2 feet, because my mom went through so many abusive relationships herself, you know. That was drilled into me. You cannot be afraid. If you're afraid, you're wrong. And like I had to learn that that's wrong. Like I had to unlearn that, because when I would get afraid to do something, I would immediately shut down and I'd be immobile. I wouldn't move on it, because I'm like, my upbringing taught me you're not scared of shit. You shouldn't be scared of shit, you know. And if you're scared, then there's something wrong with you, you know. Like, you know, you're X's daughter, you know, you're Cece's daughter. You can't, you know. And I had to learn, like, no, that's not, like, it's not physically possible to never be scared to do something, especially if you're wanting to do something important and that you care about, you know. So I'd unlearn that. And the third thing that I learned was, you have got to stand for something, or what is the point? Like, you've got to have a purpose. You have got to have, like, and I think that was drilled into me very deeply, and one of the reasons why I'm very mission driven, to the point of detrimenting my own health as well. Like, I've had to learn a balance with that, because in the beginning I was very, ooh, I was borderline martyr syndrome, right up there with, like, you know, and it put me in the hospital. And I had to, Daniel has been huge in making me realize that, like, no, I deserve joy as well. And the more I'm doing well, the more I can give back to the community and things like that. So that's been a journey too. But those are definitely three. They're like, giving up is not an option. Uh, but rebellion was celebrated. So if you look back in my life and you see all the suicide attempts, I mean, that makes sense too there. Like, I remember good grades were expected. Those weren't celebrated. Like, those were just expected. Like, you know, but if I rebelled, if I was like, I came home and said, oh yeah, I beat so and so up because he was running his mouth, it was like, good job, girl. Or like, I didn't stand for the Pledge of Allegiance because we just lived on the reservation and now I know what the real history is. And my parents would come to the office and be like, she ain't standing for shit. She ain't standing for this shit. Good job, girl. You know, like, anytime I rebelled, it was celebrated, you know? So that has shown up in my life too. And knowing, like, that's not always not always the best.
Did you talking about the borderline, feeling martyrish in that early time period when you were just sort of latching on to the power of what it is that you do in the community? Was the victory sweeter by virtue of almost hurting yourself by not grabbing the oxygen mask for yourself first? Was the triumph of helping someone made more powerful for you at that time by virtue of having sacrificed yourself to make it happen? Was that kind of a validating thing that was going on for you?
I don't know if it was that, more so than at that time period, I was very extremist in my beliefs that, and I still, to an extent, believe this, but not as extreme as I used to, that we get everything we ask for. And all the atrocities in this world can all go back to the blood on our own hands. The cocoa trade, I mean, everything. They sell us what we say we want to buy. And if we keep buying it and we keep it, like, it's us. The people have always had the power. And if and we just can't seem to get our shit together or admit to ourselves that this is what we asked for, this is what we received. And I was very much in that mindset. I was very much against anything with vanity. I even had like a little saying. It was like, save humanity, destroy your vanity. I was very borderline communist now, like getting on like a little, I was going way left, you know. Um, and I just felt like I was so angry once I realized how simple it was to make a difference in this world. And I felt like nobody was doing anything. And I was so angry. And I was like, I saw so many activists sacrificing their entire lives for a cause. And they would not have had to do that if everybody would do their damn part. And so I was very much in the mindset of, I'm going to show you what it's like to sacrifice. I'm going to show you what it's like to do the damn work so you can get involved and do it too. But that just fed the resentment, and you can't build community in a very effective way if you're doing this. You know what I mean? And I was very vocal about how I felt the arts were in this area, which I had to come back and apologize later for, because I was like, oh, I get it now. Like, but young Shane was very much like, no, like this is what you do, and like, how dare you not be in these schools, and how dare you be a poet and you're not giving back to your community. And then I had to learn, like, not every poet needs to be in the classroom.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, there's different forms of activism. It takes all of us and everybody. And I even learned more about like the simplicity of leadership and the simplicity of making a difference. It's always those small things that have the biggest impact, you know? Everything else is show. Everything else is just prey behavior. Like, I was in protests, I got tear gassed, I got like, I wasn't sleeping, I wasn't eating, I was just like, go, 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 and I'm doing so much more now, living a life that's focused on incorporating joy than I was incorporating sacrifice, and like by huge amounts. And I think, if I'm completely honest, and I have a lot of poems about this, it is for someone who is in the trenches doing the work, it is so much easier to just revert to a number, to just lose your identity, to have your identity replaced with the service you're providing, and lose yourself in that. Because it's almost like when soldiers come back from war, they say that's the hardest part. They can't sleep in the bed, they can't like handle the HOA housing and shit, because like this is, and I have a painting about it, but it's something that me and my close friends talk about too. We call it, that's some civilian shit. Like, oh, the nail tech didn't do my nails right. That's some civilian shit, like, but it's just so hard to like be in society and talk to civilians who aren't like doing the work. And it's just so easy to stay in the war. It's just so easy to stay in the war and not face who you are without it, and I had to end up in the hospital in order to figure out, like I distinctly remember having to ask myself, why am I doing this? Like, every decision I made, like if I went to go post on social media, why am I doing this? They had to question everything. And I mean, you tackle on adrenaline disorder, which I had, which I mean, that makes you go, 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 go. I mean, that was like a whole nother level to it. And I think so much time has passed now that I've also realized that subconsciously, when you're suicidal, dying a noble death sounds way more acceptable and way better than the alternative. So if I just die in these streets, who's going to fault me for it? And that's a hard thing to face too. So.
You've actually answered my question before I even asked it, which is amazing. I was basically going to ask you, the angrier you got, it sounds like you deconstructed yourself harder.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Because it's a reflection, you know, it's a reflection. And I mean, and the good intention was there. And I will have to give that version of Shane credit, because she got Guerrilla Poets off the ground, and she let everybody know that we ain't fucking around. We're serious about this. But I also was holding so much onto control that I wasn't allowing the people to grow around me. I was hurting the relationships around me. I was like hurting my health, and I already had the adrenaline disorder, hurting me. Um, yeah, and I mean, I had to face all of that. And then and I was talking to a young activist about this last week, actually, because she was asking me about, the good that we do is never selfless because we get something out of it. And I said, that is true. That is true. And she said, so what's the line between martyr syndrome or virtue signaling, as opposed to real activism and real, like, real doing the work? And I told her, I said, I think there's phases to it. I think you have to go through that angry stage. You have to go through all those emotions because you're waking up to the atrocities of the world. You're waking up to all these things and you're going to have strong emotions about them. And you're either going to feel helpless or you're going to feel enraged or both, and you're going to have to go through that. But the difference between the two is if you go into a space and I gotta save them, it's up to me to save them because no one else is doing it. That's martyr syndrome. But if you go into a space and go, I need to help co-create and build a space for these folks to save themselves, that's community. That is community because it ain't about you. It ain't about like you're not the savior. You're there to connect and to allow others to connect and to show up in the world how you want the world to be. So that's like the difference. And yeah, so I mean, I definitely think there's layers to it and there's phases to it, and it's okay to be in one of those phases. But anybody who studies activism and studies things like that knows that it's not the rallying against, unless it's severe. Now, don't get me wrong, like those riots in Egypt and in Mexico and in France, I mean, like they tore the brick by brick, they tore buildings apart until like, the government or the cartel was like, okay, whoa, here's your girls back. Here's, here, yes, we'll stop taxing or whatever. But in other situations, it's the questions that you ask the corporations that allow them to have the discoveries. This is like there's an amazing article about this activist who went into this this like food plant, this like animal, slaughterhouse, and got hired there to infiltrate, right? And the owner of the factory took him out to eat because he had found out he was actually part of this activist group. And at the table at dinner, he like called him out and was like, I know what you've been doing and I know what you're about and blah blah. And the activist stayed calm and he just asked him questions like, well, did you always want it to be this way? Like, what got you started in this? What made you want to do this? And like throughout the conversation, the guy who owned the factory exposed that like he didn't want to be slaughtering these animals this way. He started out wanting to do it in a humane way, but then the demand was so high and he didn't know what to do. And then he just like, and what's so incredible about that article and that real story about that activist is, they parted their separate ways after that dinner, and a year later the guy shut down the factory. You know what I mean? So instead of like storming the fences outside, having like an honest human conversation to just ask the right questions at the right time, change the mindset, which changed the life of the person, and then changed, at least that factory. So I think if you're in it for long enough, you start to see what works and what doesn't. But
That's
there,
that's the rainbow, right? Though that's the
yeah,
rainbow from fear, because anger is fear, right? So from fear to vulnerability, that's the rainbow,
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
and just applied in a different way.
Yeah.
You said something that I really um wanted to circle back to when you were talking about the civilian stuff. Um it's like not only are they not in the conversation, there are a lot of people who don't even know the conversation exists. So as an activist, if you're um, doing what you're doing in the community, is part of the goal to help people like wake up that there's a conversation taking place.
I feel like, yeah, that's part of it. And I think poetry definitely helps that, especially, spreading the arts and things like that and having conversations like this one and making it accessible. But I also feel like I do see the change in society. I mean, I'm not that old. I only just turned 40. But I have seen a significant difference. Like there's language now. Like when I was in high school, we didn't know anything about, I didn't know what a panic attack was. I never heard the word trauma. I think, I didn't know that's what I was experiencing. I didn't know PTSD was a thing, you know? And I feel like people are more aware of the conversations happening. They just don't know what to do about it. They're like, where is my place in this that makes sense for me? And another perfect example of that is we need people who are focused on joy. And I still have my own biases when it comes to like very wealthy people that I'm trying to work on because I'm trying to be one of them very wealthy people too. I'm trying to give it back as much as I receive it. So I'm working on that. But I have a poem about being at this like really ritzy country club, and this like model was there, and she was like, I was live painting, and that's why I was there. And she was like, "Oh, well, what do you do?" And I'm telling her everything because I'm being honest, and you could just see this look on her face, like, "Oh, aren't you just, oh, you just out here making a difference or whatever." It was like it rubbed her the wrong way. And she said to me, well, I just want to focus on joy. I just want to look pretty and I want to have fun. And I just can't do it anymore. I just can't, like, I'm just so exhausted. I just want to enjoy my life. I'm not going to have it forever. And I don't really care about changing the world. And in that moment, I could have been, and there are times where I haven't been as loving as I was in that moment. But in that moment, I decided to lead with love, and I looked at her and I was like, but you are making a difference because we need reminders to focus on joy, and we need reminders to focus on love. We need reminders of like, yes, yes, bitch, you fabulous. And like, we need that energy. And she literally started crying. And it was like the first time anybody had ever told her, like, no, you matter. How you show up in the world is making a difference. Like that matters. You matter. And it was this whole, like, all of this stuff from her family of like, oh, she wasn't smart enough to be a doctor. She wasn't like, able to do this or that. So she just felt like that her looks was all she had left. But someone saying like, hey, no, like your joy is enough, like that blew her mind. And like I think about that when it comes to the people who aren't aware of the conversation, but we see them still out in the community making a difference because of the way they show up in the world and the way you feel loved in their presence. Like they don't even have to do anything. You just feel better being around them. Um, like people like that, it's like we need that too. Because it can't all just be us in the trenches out here just sludging around. I tried that. It doesn't work. It's not sustainable, but hopefully that like shed some light on that about like the conversations that we're having or not having. I think it's all making a difference. And I think that when we start, just like you can't weigh hills, one person's worst day is the same as someone else's. Um, but one person's activism can be just as powerful as another. Um, I I think so, at least. I've seen some beautiful things happen from just the smallest things. We did a show called Auditory Graffiti where we went into the community and we interviewed folks who were unhoused, and we gave them supplies, and I always keep bags in my car. That's a whole nother backstory of why I do that. But uh, it was incredible how all of them, they all had different stories of how they ended up there, but they all said the same thing. I just want someone to look at me and acknowledge my presence. That's it. Like, again, when I asked them, like, what would matter the most to you? It wasn't like, give me $1,000 so I could get my shit back together. It wasn't any of that. It was like, I'm so tired of feeling like a ghost. I'm so tired of feeling like my existence is nothing. Like I don't even matter. I just want somebody while I'm standing on the street corner to look at me and smile or wave. That's all I want. And I was like, wow, that could be the difference between them being here today and not tomorrow, you know?
Absolutely. So you've got several different groups that are being served by the GPN there. And like you were describing originally, They're very different in age, very different in need, kind of, you know, all over the map. How do you, as a leader of this nonprofit, um, allow space for others to come in and sort of ride along with you? Because you're in all of those spaces, right? Like not all of the GPs are in all of the spaces that you're in, but you're in all of the spaces that all of the GPs are in. So how does that work for you? Because when you and maybe it goes back to what you were talking about earlier, the evolution of a leader. You know, can you speak to that?
Yeah, I feel like when I first started, I felt like I had to write the curriculum. I had to be in every space. Like, yes, I am in all the spaces still to this day, but I'm not the one leading them, and I don't have to be there physically. So like, I feel completely confident being like, y'all figure it out. But you're not going to figure it out if I take control of the situation. So I have full faith that even if you mess up, it's going to be okay. We'll figure it out. It'll be all right. It's not the end of the world, you know? But I feel like as an executive director, I think it's very important that you do go to all the spaces, that you are aware of what's going on in your organization. And especially if your job is to, you know, keep the vision going and all that, and you got to report back to the board and all of those things, you know, you got to know what the hell's going on under your roof, you know. Um, but I think for me, I care so deeply about it, and I care so much about our members, and I care so much about, like, I'm so fueled by it that I want to be in those spaces because I know the magic's gonna happen, you know. And it could be like a big flash of a magic happening, of like someone having a breakthrough, or it could be just as a bright of a flash with like a teenager feeling safe enough to take their hoodie off. Like, oh, the armor came off, you know, that's a win. You know, I know that the magic is going to happen every single time, and I'm looking for it, you know. And I love it so much that I want to see it, and it never gets old. Never gets old. Um, but I do feel comfortable to where I can, like, you know, I don't have to be there. There's times where I've been very inspired this year by other members being like, hey, I need to take a mental health day. And I always thank them for that. I'm like, thank you for taking the day off, because it inspires me to take one off when I don't feel my best. And I'm like, maybe I shouldn't go in today, you know? Um, but I also think that it might be some Gemini vibes. It might just be, I like to be around different people. I like to, you know, unless I'm on a 5 day cruise, right? Like, like I like to I like to be in community, and I like to, I don't know, I love people, and yeah, it just fuels me. So that's one of the reasons why I think I'm in all the spaces. And I also think it's important for parallel leadership too. So like, what's happening on the board level needs to be happening on the boots on the ground level, needs to be happening. Like, if you about it, you about it, you know. Um, and I'm very blessed to say that, like, since the beginning, we have always been diverse. We've always had different ages, which is one of the reasons why we can reach so many different groups of people, because we all have different backgrounds, we all have different cultures, we're all different ages, you know. And so whenever a member is passionate about a certain group, we're like, okay, how do we support you in this initiative and make it happen, you know. um but it's all umbrellaed under mental health. I mean, it always goes back to mindset, you know. But I think one of the reasons why we can be in so many spaces is because we allow so much space in the group for folks to show up authentically as well. So we even had, shout out to Agent Orange, we had a member once who was an anarchist. And when we would give assignments out, we'd be like, okay, everybody but you, man. We know you're not going to listen to rules. And you'll get it done. We have full faith that you will. You just get it done in your own way. And I mean, so we even had an anarchist in the group who was just like, I'm gonna do whatever the fuck I want. And we're like, we're good. All right. You know, and he did. And it was always awesome, you know? So like, we're very accepting and open. And like, and especially since it's peer to peer, like we know, like some members are triggered by setting dates. They don't want they don't want like, okay, I'm going to show up at this workshop at this time. And so we'll be like, all you got to do is just show up once a month to something. You ain't got to tell me what. I have faith in you that you will show up accordingly wherever you feel you want to show up. But deadlines are a thing for them. They freak out. It's previous trauma in their body. It's, and so like figuring out and being able to figure, what do you need? How do you operate? How can we support you in that? And give you the grace to be like, well, if the whole thing fell apart, we care enough about the mission that we're going to keep going anyway, so we'll be all right. So
Well, and I think it's part of the beauty of what the GPs do is that, the GPs is not a group of people who have these perfect lives and everything's put together. We all out there struggling. So, and show up, struggling and show up. And that is a testament to the power of the mission.
yeah,
Because every single one of the GPs believe in that transformative power. I think one of the things that really makes you unique, though, is a lot of people have ideas. A lot of people have passions. A lot of people see what could be. And they're just not able to apply the do it to the idea of it. And I think that's why I respond so strongly to you, because I'm like, well, why can't we? What do you mean? You think we can't? What? You're crazy. We can do this. Let's roll. Let's go. And you are a doer. You apply action. You press the gas pedal.
yeah, I'm very project oriented. I love oh, here's the idea, let's build it, let's put it out into the world, let's do the thing. I'm very, very project oriented, and I could be considered an overachiever, a high, like where it's like, okay, sit down. Like even though this summer, like summer is usually I have some downtime and I get to like travel, it's still like allowing myself to sit here and watch, YouTubers put on their makeup and talk about true crime and drink my hot cocoa and wrap up in my little blanket or play Skyrim on play video games or whatever, or read my little smut romance novels. It's so funny. Everybody's like, "Oh, you're a poet. What books are you reading?" And I'm like, "Smut." But but I've hit my 40s, and that's what 40-year-old women do. Apparently, we sit poolside, we read our smut
I
books.
bet it's horror. I bet it's horror smut, isn't it?
No, I've just well, yeah, there's a little bit of that, but let's be real. But I mean, but I do have to like actively, like slow myself down and be like, Shane, you don't have to do anything right now. Like take a day off, girl. It's okay. If I do like to be in the woods, so I do go camping a lot. I try to be in nature as much as possible because that rejuvenates me. That's like, to me, it's like taking the middleman out and being directly with God, in whatever form you see God or whatever concept of that you want to, name it, call it, whatever, but and I don't know where it comes from. It might be because when I was younger, those good grades were expected. I remember we traveled a lot, so I had to go to multiple schools in a single year, and I would come home with stacks of homework. And if I'm going to catch up to where this school is, I got to go through this stack. And I remember just sitting there and like, Fraggle Rock would be on the TV, and I'm eating my cereal and I'm just filling out math problems, and I'm just like, got to get through it so I could catch up to where their curriculum is. Or I would be so far ahead of their curriculum, I'd just be like, filling it out. But I would still have to like get through that in order to be in the school, So it might be just that was ingrained in me because I had to do it growing up. I don't know. I really don't know where it comes from, but it is something I'm very grateful for because I get so much joy out of it too. I mean, it's definitely, I have lived a life that reward center of checking the thing off the list is definitely a big part of how I live my life. Yeah. And I mean, as long as I don't go too far with it, and I also focus on, my own passion projects in my personal life and my own vacations and things like that, I'm good. But yeah, it probably stems from that of just growing up having to get these things squared away so we can move on to the next thing.
All right, one really important question. Were you a Count Chocula girl?
I was.
I knew
I
it.
was.
I had this vision of you sitting there with a bowl of Count Chocula come in my head. I'm like, she was a Count Chocula girl.
I was.
Okay.
I also loved Fruity Pebbles and the Cookie Crisp. I liked
Oh,
the
yeah.
yeah. French toast too. That was I just liked cereal in general. Yeah, I think I liked cereal in general. But I still to this day, when October hits, I will go get a box of Count Chocolate. I will to this day. Yeah.
Gala food, all the cereals.
Yes, that might that might be a poem. Might
That
have to
might
read.
be a poem.
Yeah, serial killer. All right, watching true crime, eating our cereal. Like, yeah, that might be a thing. There's something to that. There's something there. Yeah.
I'm writing that down. So, you have amazing poems. I don't know if this is one you would want to share, but there was a poem that you prepared when you were going to make a presentation to the Cabarrus Arts Council.
Yes. The
That,
moneymaker poem.
yes, is that one that you would be interested in sharing? It's such an amazing piece.
I can. I do not have it memorized. I memorized it for that event, but I have since replaced it with other poems in my brain. But I wrote it specifically for that. So also pro tip for anybody out there who wonders about should I do this event as a poet? They're not going to pay me, blah, blah. Listen, they asked me to come and be their speaker for Breakfast for the Arts. That was like a big fundraiser for them, the one they do once a year. They did not pay me. I custom wrote the poem, memorized it, got it performance ready and did the poem. And I ended up with like $7,000 in contracts because of who was in the room.
Mhm.
So, I'm not going to tell you like, don't do the poetry for free. Uh, just do what makes sense for you. So anyway,
Well,
but yeah,
this
I always like to say that story because so I hear a lot of like poets who've been in the industry for a long time say, oh, I'll do anything for free, and I'm like, first of all, you ought to be giving back. You ought to at least be doing 3 things for free a year, okay, as part of like community service. And secondly, you don't know who's in that room. So
this
but I
this poem that you're about to read, I mean, I've always loved your work from the moment I met you. I've always loved your work and it's been so inspiring. But this piece, this is the one that made me want to be a GP. And this was the one where I was like, dude, let me just carry your pen for you. Like, it's just such an amazing piece.
Yeah, I call it the money making poem because whenever I get hired to write a poem for a nonprofit, they typically put it right before the ask. And it has been proven. So if y'all want to pitch to other like museums, organizations, and you want to like do a poem for their cause, donations double when a poet speaks before the ask. So that's why we call it the moneymaker poem. So when you're hired to write a poem for a cause and they put it right before the ask, people will give double what they gave last year
Nice.
because poetry is powerful. So,
Now, is this the one where you're
yeah,
talking about the value of the arts and why the arts should be in schools and all that? Yeah.
yeah. So, okay, this is how it goes. I got my little, all right. They say a man learns to write so he can write well, but a man learns to write so he can write his way out of hell. The same can be said for artists, being one myself. All artists are compelled to reflect beauty as a form of hope. Because if we can take tragedy and turn it into tapestry, pain into painted masterpiece, then life is indeed worth living. When I was 16, I wrote every single day. My poems were as feverish as a field of violent violets, all fighting over themselves to bloom. At night, I painted till I couldn't see straight, only to pass out at my easel like an altar. I painted like my life depended on it, because it did. Because grief had twisted me around trauma so tightly that I couldn't tell the difference between myself and a lost cause. But art, y'all, art was my safe place, a creative space where only I could go. So even when I was young, I knew I wanted to use the arts as a tool to help other teens like me speak their truth, because no one seemed to think we needed therapy, only punishment. See, we were the bad students. Didn't know that behind the scenes, I had tried to take my own life, black myself out into my own starry night, once despair and rage consumed me after my father died. The unfortunate thing about healing is if you don't know how to express what you're feeling, you can't even get started. If you don't know how to process your trauma, sift through emotions, it's really hard not to end up a product of your environment. So maybe a man doesn't learn how to write so he can write his way out of hell. Maybe a man learns to write so he can heal himself, rewrite the narrative. And that's exactly what the arts do. They grant access to what's going on inside of us and what we can do. I'm 40 now, and I teach personal development through the arts in lockdown facilities, shelters, and schools. And every single week, I see the proof that art heals, changes lives, makes a difference. I've seen paint smooth over the canyon of creases that circumstances rip through them and climb one line at a time to their own freedom. I've seen poetry grant more forgiveness and revenge than any bullet could blast. I've seen them write themselves out of trauma, dare to dream for a better tomorrow. I've seen a girl refuse to trust any kind word from an adult, damned herself ugly, then painted herself beautiful enough times to finally believe it. You see, in order to understand what an opportunity is, you got to believe you're worthy of receiving it. When all you've ever been told is how much you don't deserve a chance to grow up, it is not enough to have the opportunity if you don't know what to do with it. That's why it is vital that the arts be a part of our school systems. I asked a group of juvenile detention teens what a resource was, and they couldn't even define it. When a classroom or a home becomes a third world war zone, it is easy to forget our freedoms, our endless possibilities. But I know that the arts show probabilities. I believe that art saves lives, that our work is a field with enough nutrients for a harvest of light, because I've watched plant in my students the seed of pride. When my students see their artwork framed in a gallery for the first time, their first song recorded, or their first poem published, they literally weep. There is a hope that floods through their eyes once they recognize what a person, a city, a resource, an opportunity can prove that fairy tale endings do exist, that someone out there sees the beauty in them. When you leave here today, please do not forget that every single one of us is a gallery worth walking through, that each one of us has a mark to make, a gift to give, to be the living proof, that the arts matter beyond statistics. They are radically changing the lives of real individuals. I know because I'm one of them. I wouldn't be alive here today with you if it didn't. And that's a mouthful. I stumbled through a lot of it, but but yeah, that's what we call the moneymaker poem. Yeah, and the power of telling your story and how that moves you to your purpose, and how that call to action, that call of arms, that really just inspires folks to be like, okay, I feel the thing, I'm inspired now, and now I know what to do with it. So yeah, having that call to action is very vital if you're a poet wanting to make a difference. It's one thing to get folks riled up, but you got to tell them what to do with that energy.
Catalyst, now you know. She just rewired your brain, girlfriend. And I know Shaki G's sitting there looking at your little Afghan that's on your chair, and she's going,
Yeah. There's a beautiful story behind this too. Trinity Living, which is the elderly daycare center, provides the snacks for the Henderson students. and one of the ladies there has stage 4 cancer. And she said, I'm gonna cry. Mm, she said, I feel like those students feel a lot how we feel, like we're ignored and just forgotten by society. She hand knit 20 blankets for the students, and this is one of her blankets. So yeah, but beautiful little side story, but yeah.
I
Whew.
love helping people, people helping people. And I just feel like that you're giving the opportunity because people feel heard and they receive empathy and they receive love, that they can then turn around and give that grace. One of the most amazing things I think I've ever witnessed, and I don't know if you remember this, but I went with you to a facility for a mental health workshop, and we were talking about love languages. And there were two women who knew each other through this facility, and we were talking about the different love languages. And one lady wanted to share, and in her excitement in sharing, she made the comment that she had forgotten the other lady's name. And I saw the face of that woman, and she was hurt. I mean, she was like hurt, but there was an edge of anger to it. There was this sort of outrage, like, you don't know my name, like, you know, and we had the opportunity to help them gain an understanding of the other one because they had two different love languages. The one lady was very much an acts of service person, and this other lady was a words person. And so the words person was hurt by this one not being able to call her name to mind immediately. But she didn't understand that this one over here, even though she couldn't call her name to mind, if she needed, the other gal needed help. I mean, she was there. She was her ride or die. And so allowing those folks to sort of have that moment of connection and realization, and like watching that happen, that was an amazing experience. And
Yeah, and
you're living that all the time.
right. And it happens every single week. And it's always incredible. It's like you can see the it rewiring. You can see the new neural pathways. Like, I mean, it's just beautiful. And I think I think it really is just like just like how poetry, I deeply believe, is the practice of being present. I think that once as a facilitator you do that, and you are completely present, then you can catch like the lady's face. Then you can see, oh, this is an opportunity. Like something beautiful is about to happen, like, oh, whereas, another facilitator might be like, oh, this is a distraction. We need to like refocus back on what we were saying and squash this. Instead, it's like, no, let's explore this. Like, that was interesting reaction. What's happening here? Um, and I teach it in the trauma informed care training I do too, is like the 5-minute pause can save the entire school year. The entire school year. Just take the 5 minutes. What's happening? You know, it can literally save the entire school year. So
I'm writing that down to talk about with you later. Trauma informed training.
yeah, I've been very blessed. I've trained all of Cabarrus County teachers. I was part of the RISE conference. I've trained, oh Lord, a lot of folks. Arts Plus in Charlotte, Arts Empowerment Project in Charlotte, Promise Resource Network is another. Like I've trained I did like a whole training tour in Cabarrus County. So um, I hit up all of the elementary, middle, and high school. So um, yeah, and it's the only trauma informed care training that was co-created by the students. So, and because it makes no sense. Like I was going to so many trauma informed care trainings where I was like, this does not work in the classroom. I don't know why you're teaching folks this. This doesn't work. And then it's like, why are you not asking the students' voice in it when they're who you're serving? And so over 300 students around Mecklenburg County contributed to the training of the course. So See, as far as I know, it's the only course out there where that has been the case. So it really goes into depth on like what your students are really thinking, how they're feeling. It goes into how trauma plays a part in all of it. And yeah, but anyway, I'll stop pitching that. But it's on my website if you would like to take it. It is pre-recorded. I need to update it because there's things that I have learned. I learned that if the students aren't filling out the evaluation form, it's probably because they look like court documents. Yeah, didn't know that was a trigger. And so when the students was like, shit, looks like what I have to fill out for my parole officer. And I went, oh, well, that makes sense. I wouldn't want to fill it out either. Thank you for that feedback.
And if you hadn't had that conversation, you would never have known.
Right. But they also have to feel like open enough to say that, you know? So
So
yeah.
can we just talk for a second about all of the different hats that you have? Because there's just so much that you have touched on, so many lives that you've touched because of all of the different things that you are passionate about and able to do. So obviously you're an artist and you're a poet. Go from there.
So in the entrepreneur world, we call it multi-passionate. Uh, and there's a book that is Refuse to Choose. That's the name of the book. And that changed so much for me because it, you know, as an entrepreneur, they'll tell you you got to niche down, you got to niche down. And yes, in certain sectors you do. That is very true. There's target audiences for each of your books. There's target audiences for like each of your services. Like, and I mean, that is a thing. But in the book, it talks about how can you integrate this into a holistic point of view of how you live your life and what you do for a living, where you don't have to choose, because the idea for a multi-passionate to choose, oh, art above everything else. Like I'm going to be a live painter. I'm going to live paint events and weddings, and that's it. As opposed to like I'm only going to do poetry on the stage and workshops and all of that, and it's like we would rather just I wouldn't say die, but we don't want to do that. We don't want to choose. It just sounds miserable to us, right? So the biggest part about wearing those different hats is really having to discern what makes me joyful in this moment right now and either outsource the rest. Like I push a lot of gigs and a lot of things onto other poets. And what makes me joyful, and then what things are in alignment with my goals this year and staying focused on that. So, for example, I get asked all the time to come do people's birthday parties. And I don't know why, because I'm like, have you seen my poetry on YouTube? Have you, what? I don't think you want me at your birthday party. I don't think it's not going to go. I mean, for God's sakes, the tagline to my poetry that Jim Love gave is, we'll have fun till we get there. Like, it's not, I don't think this is going to go the way you think it's going to go. You know what I mean? So, knowing yes, I love poetry and yes, I love to be on stage and share work. I don't want to do birthday parties, but I will write this custom poem for Fort Cancer or WFAE, which is like one that me and Lady V are working on right now, and also sharing the stage. Like it's half the work when you share the work. You know what I mean? So like learning that like WFAE contacted me, right, which is like a division at NPR, and they want me to come do a poem for their Equilibrium Awards, and it's about equity, and I'm white. Like, well, like I appreciate that you are a fan of my work, but what if I brought Lady V with me and we did a group piece on equity? That would kind of make more sense. And isn't that equity sharing the stage? Like, isn't that equity? Like, you know what I mean? And I was like, will you pay her the same amount you pay me? And she was absolutely. And I was like, all right, V, come on, it's half the work. She writes half of it, I write the other half of it, half of us perform. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's not so overwhelming when you're sharing the stage. And also you're giving back. You're also building platforms for other artists. And it's fun because you get to do it together. So it's like you learn how to make these things work in a way that is not stressful, that is fueling and joyful. And it's just really like learning how to say no to things that, even though it's the same sector of what you love to do, it's not in alignment with the joy points, or it's not in alignment with the goal for whatever it is that year. And then allowing yourself to share these spaces so that it's not so overwhelming. Does that make any sense? Hopefully that answers your question. But that really is the key to doing all of the things as community, and just an invitation to play, and learning like what to say no to, and being okay with that, and not being like in a place of, oh, if I don't take this gig, if I don't get this thing, I'm going to be broke. Like, no, money will come. It's fine, you know, but hopefully that makes sense.
Absolutely. So, entrepreneur, poetry coach, TED Talker. You're a TED Talker.
I have a TED Talk, which is funny. Whenever somebody is like, oh, wow, you have a TED Talk, like, how did you get it? Who put you on? I'm like, bitch, I put me on. Like, I forwarded to the website and applied. You can too. Like, somebody suggested I did it, and I just did it on a whim. I didn't think that I would actually get in. And then they emailed me back and was like, hey, you've made it to the next round. And I'm like, oh, shit, I guess I gotta like figure out what I'm gonna say. Like, ooh, okay. But it's funny because like a lot of those different things that happen, you just see if like, well, they're either gonna take it or not. And it's just like, I don't know, it's really interesting how those things happen. But yeah, the TED Talk is interesting. Everybody thinks your phone's gonna blow up too after you get a TED Talk, and that's not the case. It's like it's it's just sits there and people comment on it. And
Was there ever a time that you felt like your path was to be like that being an artist or a poet or both was going to be the sum of your, like, this is what I'm going to do for my career, my work, you know, whatever.
yeah,
Was that kind of a thing?
when I was a kid, I wanted to be an artist. And I knew right out the gate I wanted to be an artist. So it started out with me, even though I wrote poetry and did art at a young age, I was like, art is what I'm gonna do for a living. I want to be an artist. And then when I got to high school, I was like, oh, I kind of want to be a journalist. Like I had this like dream that I would be like Hunter S. Thompson, except without the drugs. And I would like be hired to go write about these events. And I would just piss my publishers off because I wouldn't write about the event. I'd write about like the atmosphere and like what I experienced and everything. But everyone would love it so much that they just kept hiring me, you know, like and then I had this like viewpoint that I would write speeches. Like I wanted to write speeches that would like stir people. And then I found out that there are bands that played in the middle of riots. And I was like, oh, I want to do poems in the middle of riots with like fire and like buildings like breaking and stuff. And like had all these like ideas about that. And then dad died. And then, things were just out of control. Mental health in the shitter. I mean, really, really bad. I was not stable whatsoever. My mom wanted me to go to Tom Savini School to do horror movie effects out west. I was too terrified to move that far away from home, but I didn't want to be at home because me and her were at each other's throats. I mean, it was just, I was not mentally okay. So I went into graphic design because I also bought into the belief that there's no money in the arts. So the closest I can get is a career in graphic design. And so I did graphic design for a long time. And I just didn't think that it was possible to financially be stable in the arts until I got my first paycheck for doing a poem on stage. And I went, wait, did you write the wrong number down? I think you gave me the wrong check. And they were like, no, that's your pay. And I was like, I did two poems, but this, they were like, yeah. And I'm like, what? Like, and, and then I still had to fight that because I was very anti-capitalist. I was very I mean, I still kind of, but it was like, no, money's bad. And it's, but like money doesn't corrupt people corrupt money. And like when you're financially stable, you can do more in the community. And it was a long journey to that too. But and there's so much around it. Like oh my God, like family being like, that's not real work. And it's like, yeah, the hell it is. It's just emotional labor. Or it's like, you don't see all the prep work that goes into all of the things, the back and forth you have to do. Like, there's a lot. Um, but like family get like it starts feeling funky about what you're doing for a living. Your friends start feeling funky about it. Like, and then even other your peers, they're like, oh, you're selling out if you're writing poems for other organizations. And I'm like, why? It's a cause I believe in. What, how is that selling out? It's like, so it's all these myths and our beliefs and biases around money that you have to address within yourself and you have to sift through. Um, yeah, it's a lot, y'all.
But you have managed to do a thing that many in the poetry and I'm sure art community as well have tried to figure out how to manipulate those variables, and for whatever combination of reasons they have not been able to put those things together. And it's funny, I have a poem that I've written recently that I have a line in it, bending light my way. And when I wrote that line, I was thinking about you, because that's kind of what you have managed to do. You have managed to bend light your way for the good of all of the people um, that your organization is serving. And it's pretty fantastic.
Yeah, thank you. I think definitely the your way is part of it. I feel like if the things aren't sliding into place, a lot of time it's marketing. So I am grateful for the graphic design background for that. I mean, I know it's like your poetry doesn't suck, the marketing just does. You just haven't gotten into the like who's who in this museum or who's who in this school or whatever, there's something there that's off. But I also feel like being brave enough in your choices of what money you do take and what money you turn down keeps you going and joyful as well. Um, for example, like the equity thing, a great opportunity. WFAE is huge. I mean, that's a part of NPR. That's like a huge deal. I wasn't gonna say no, but I was also like, this kind of ain't sitting right. Like, let's make it make sense. Like being brave enough to negotiate things and then being brave enough to pass on stuff. There's some organizations that will contact me for events that I have no business doing. You know, and I'll be like, I can't do that, but I know an amazing Black poet who can. Here's their contact information and send them their way. Because I could take that money, but am I going to be able to sleep that night? Like, so you really gotta, again, it's alignment, man. I believe if you do what you feel called to do, and everything, heart, mind, soul is in alignment, the universe is going to provide, and nothing can exist in a vacuum. And if you just work on your mindset, work on your self-trust that, hey, if I know bills are short, I can do a pop-up workshop about something that I'm passionate about, charge $15 or whatever, lights will stay on until I get it figured out. Like if you are in alignment and you are walking in your purpose, you are going to be provided for. It might not be six figures, but your light's going to be on, there's going to be a roof over your head, and there's going to be food in your stomach. So
You are speaking some truth. I had an image in my head earlier of a coiling clockwise and beaming light and putting positive energy out into the universe. There are so many things that coil counterclockwise and pull light out of our world, just pull all the juice out, pull all the good stuff out. So we got to have people like what you're doing to put the light back in.
yeah, and I mean, I'm also a big believer too, when it comes to like the financial part, like there's nothing wrong with still working that 9 to 5 and going out in the community. Not everybody is built for entrepreneurship because it's scary out here, y'all. It's a lot, and you gotta keep promoting yourself, and it's uncomfortable, and like, There is nothing wrong with clocking into that 9 to 5. And then when you clock out, you go into your community or you hit that stage or do whatever you want to do and you have that stable paycheck coming in. Ain't nothing wrong with that whatsoever. Um, and I don't know. I just think when it comes to, I don't know, when it comes to the arts and it comes to success, it's like, what does success looks like for you? Don't buy into someone else's dream. Don't be trying to climb someone else's spiral up to reach their light. Their light not might not be comfortable for you. It might burn you, or it might be, too bright or something. And you're like, oh, I don't like that. Dim it down a little bit. Damn. Like I want an orange glow to my light. I don't want this like cobalt blue thing you got going on. Or like, I mean, I just think that you gotta figure out what works for you and what makes you happy and what fulfills you, you know.
How do you maintain the division between Shane and GPs, right? Because there are so many parts of the GP journey or your journey and vice versa. So how do you maintain a healthy?
I honestly, I don't know that I always do. I think being okay with that and being aware of that, like, and you can see it clearly on my social media. There, if you scroll back, you'll see like me in the combat boots that I go into the detention facility with, and I'm sitting outside my house, and Daniel's just like, I don't know how to reach her because she's still in the trenches. She's still like, she's still there. And I'm, he's like, baby, come to bed. And I'm like, I can't, um, and being aware of what mind state I'm in because I know when I feel it and and asking myself, what do I need? Like, all right, I just need to be by myself for a little bit and I need to like come back or whatever. And, uh, or I need to take the day off or whatever. But I don't always feel like I have the ability to draw the line between that and my personal life. And I don't know that I should. I don't know that I should. I think that an important part about the work is allowing yourself to sit in it and and to feel it and to stay in it for a little bit. But you've got to have the self-awareness to know when it's like, okay, I'm setting this down. And rituals help. Oh, it's huge. In the trauma informed care training at the very end, one of the things that I say is this nurse that worked in a mental facility said that she would come home every day, she would light a candle, and she would thrash around her house and dance to a few songs, and then she'd blow the candle out. And that was her ritual that trained her brain and her body that you are home now. That's being left there and you're home. And that stuff works. And like sometimes you have to like when I'm done at Henderson, me and Steph go for a walk or we sit in the car and we talk about what went well that day, what didn't. Celebrate the wins. Maybe we go like get a milkshake or something. And that 15 minutes of just assessing what happened, what went well, what can we do better next time, um, allows us the ability to set it down and then return to whatever's going on in our life. But to be 100% honest, I can't always just set it down. And sometimes it's not appropriate to set it down. Sometimes some shit happens so intense that it takes a while. And just as long as you're very open with your partner and your people around you and being like, babe, like I can't always say what happens at the detention facility, but I can talk to my therapist about it, and I can tell the people in my circle, hey, some really intense shit happened. I'm just gonna need a few days, And so that's how I feel about it. I can't always I can't always separate the two. And sometimes it's okay not to, as long as you're aware and you communicate what you need.
Absolutely. We talk about trauma bonding as being, it has sort of a negative connotation. Um, but I mean, in a way, one could say that this beautiful work that you're doing in the community is a sort of positive outlet of trauma bonding.
Yeah, I feel like trauma bonding is so the reason why it has such a negative connotation is when you trauma bond, you're building forms around based in a trauma. And you have to be very careful as a facilitator, because if you build that bond around the shared trauma, then it is less likely that the person you're trying to serve is going to get out of that trauma, because the relationship was founded on the trauma. So, for example, what does that look like in real life? So, if I have a student whose dad died in high school too, was an alcoholic, but still loved their dad and whatever, and we had that shared experience, and a trauma bond forms, and they get really close to me, they're not going to heal because the trauma is keeping them close to me. And if they heal, they feel like, oh, and this is all happening subconsciously, it's not conscious. But if they heal, they're going to lose that connection, they're going to lose that community, they're going to lose blah blah blah. So as a facilitator, you have to be very mindful of that, and you have to be like, yes, we had the shared experience, what do we do about it? So you have to constantly reinforce there is a future, there is a space where we are healed together, there's something else, you know what I mean? So I think that there's a difference between trauma bonding and connection through shared experiences, which is peer-to-peer support. That's really what it is. It's peer-to-peer support as opposed to trauma bonding, if that makes any sense. But
It does. And thank you for answering that way. That was why I asked it that way, because I knew you would explain. And that's what I wanted everybody to hear. You have such an amazing way of relaying things that are very complex in a way that they're understood. Because, I mean, mental health concepts are confusing.
yeah, they are. Especially like when they go outside of those spaces, like trauma bonding in relationships, and that has its own definition. It has its own definition. Like there's different versions of these terms, right? Depending on whatever the situation is. So, but I can speak to that victim mode because I've seen it happen, and it's so frustrating as someone who who believes in like what the other person can do, um, and can see the way out, and just to have that person stuck in the victim mode, it can be very frustrating, very frustrating. Um, but then again, you learn with stuff like that. Like I learned this year, like potential isn't real. The potential you see in others is just what you would do if you were them. And wow, you want to talk about like surrendering and letting all that go. Woo! And then beautiful things happen for the other person when you realize, oh, this isn't that's not real. It's just what I would do in your situation. It's like I'm learning more and more as I get older the power of surrender, and like so much stuff comes after surrendering. But
One of the things that I really appreciate about the way you approach your work is that you want to teach people how to fish. You're not giving them the fish. You want to help them have the tools to make a fishing pole and craft a line and find the bait so that they can fish for themselves and feed themselves and be nourished. That's an educator. Where did you get that from? Did that come from your dad or your mom or both? Or is that just you?
yeah, I don't know. On the fish analogy, uh, and the fish analogy, I will also say like you can't learn to fish if you're hungry too. So maybe give the man a fish before you teach him. But there's that as well. Um, but I don't know where the wanting to teach came from. I really don't. The only thing that sparks my memory that I could say anything about is when I was a teenager. No, no, no. That's not true. When I was younger, most people were playing house, but we were playing like teacher and student. It was like, okay, we have these like botanical cards. I'm gonna teach you what these flowers are. I remember doing that as a kid, and I don't know why I did it. I really don't. I have no idea where it comes from. Maybe watching Captain Kangaroo with my dad. I don't know. I really don't know where it came from, but I do distinctly remember doing that as a kid. I don't know. I don't know. It probably seeped in somewhere with like my dad, seeing how he talked to the men who worked for him. Maybe that. was part of it. Like I don't know. But what I was gonna say is I remember being in high school and wanting to build a place like Shredder's Hideout, like in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Like I wanted a place where runaway teens could go. So even when I was a kid, even a young teenager, I wanted to work with other teens. I wanted to support other teens. So I knew that that was something in me, but I had no idea it would be like, you're going to go in and teach like personal development concepts through the arts. Like I had no idea that was like, like going to be part of the equation.
But you're doing it, and you're doing it to great effect in the community. There are wonderful things. We're getting on to like almost 2.5 hours here, and I can talk for hours with you. But before we kind of wind everything up, do you want to share a couple of the wonderful things that participants in GP's various programs have been able to do? You talked earlier about some kids who had found a path out of gang life into more productive paths. Like there's all kinds of great things.
Yeah, like there's one of the things that I'm attempting to do this year is collect all of our stories because we all had such amazing experiences in these spaces with and do it in a way that's not exploiting too because I've seen other nonprofits do that and it doesn't sit right with me and I don't like it at all. But I will share some of the things like fights in the detention facility have gone down at the Mecklenburg County Jail. I mean, the therapist stopped us in the hall and said thank you for the program because they're actually showing up to their therapy appointments and actually doing the therapy assignments because of the poetry class. The men in the facility are telling each other go write a poem when they get upset. Like what? Men, wrong with men, men are being like I don't know any other way to describe like that. The men are being like, don't pop off at the nurse, go write a poem, bro. Like that's incredible. This is wild. Yeah, we had speaking back to Promise Resource Network, we had a guy who was in there who had been on the streets for like 20 years, had lost his kids, lost his wife, lost his house, and again, pairing poetry with personal development or something with mental health. We were doing a poetry workshop on OCD and using the poetic device repetition, right? And we're talking about OCD, intrusive thought, and the guy just is like, oh my God, all this time, like I've gone to therapist after therapist and no one's been able to help me. And I haven't been able to describe what I'm experiencing. And he had OCD, intrusive thought. And it wasn't until that moment, he was like in his 50s. He was like, half of me is so relieved that I can finally get help and I know what this is and I can explain it now. And you've given me a tool, poetry, like I can excavate this, I can explain it. But the other half of me is so mad that it took so long. And I lost everything because I didn't have the language to express what I was experiencing. And I always love to give that example because it's like that is the power of language. That is the power of expression. Like when we talk about how poetry saved lives, that's a real concrete example of how, you know. Um, so I always love to give that example. My TED Talk has several examples in it about some of the students from the lockdown facilities. I mean, just incredible stuff. There's several things that have happened at the Relatives, which is a crisis center for youth who have either been kicked out of their house or their parents have been,
Liz?
removed. Let me see. Oh yeah, the
The
book.
book.
So the the residents at the Mecklenburg County Detention Facility published a book of poetry. I mean, and it's incredible, just incredible. Like they're published poets now. We got to ship books out to their families so their families could see. I mean, it's amazing. So yeah, I mean, like I could go on and on and on. There's so
And the
many.
students are filmmakers.
They're filmmakers. I mean, come on, y'all. I mean, it's just wild. It's just wild. Um, we had the mayor at one of the plays for the Henderson students too once. I mean, she was blown away. I mean, just win, 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 win. First time young poets speaking in front of folks. I mean, breakthroughs with their family. We've had like a student who had a very uh, like rough relationship with their mom be able to be closer because of the communication, and all of that. We've had, students who were on their last strike of being kicked out of the system and going into juvie, and being able to insert pauses because they took our anger management art class, like, and being like, oh, this is the signal my body is doing, and if I could just practice recognizing the signal, then I can do the pause, like, and what does anger look like? Give the texture, a color, where is it in the body, like, like suss it out, like, just so much goodness, man. I'm very blessed and grateful.
I am so, so happy that you had the opportunity to share all of this. That whoever watches this will know how awesome the work is that you started and that your organization is continuing to do, and that it's broadening its footprint. It's such a beautiful thing. It truly
Yeah.
is.
And the last thing I'll say is that y'all, there's people in your community out here doing the same thing. They're out here doing them. Find them, get involved. If you are angry or upset, I promise you, you're not hands-on enough. If you get hands-on and you start witnessing these things, you have no choice but to feel hopeful about the future of humanity. You will see, you will see it. To get hands-on. And there's people in your community doing this. They're everywhere. They're out here. People can say all they want to about how, like, oh, futile, and you know, there'll always be like this injustice in the world. Like, yeah, but I would never want to see a world without all the artists and poets in it. I would never want to see a world that where you don't even try. Fuck that, you know, because it's beautiful out in these streets. Come out here and join us.
My mother, whose birthday is 2 days after yours, one of the things that I will always remember her saying is, when you are feeling badly about yourself, go out and do something positive for someone else. And
Absolutely. And it works on all levels. Now, when I'm mad at someone, I'll send someone some love. It won't be that person, but I'll be like, hey, I don't know if I told you, but you're amazing and you got this. And I just want to pour love into you today. So you take that energy. Y'all, we're alchemists. We forget we're powerful. You are an alchemist. Take that energy, transmute it, turn it into gold. Yeah.
And you Darwined yourself, because when you got upset with somebody, you're not coming for them.
Right. Thank you so much for having me. I always enjoy our conversations anyway, and so it took me a while to get here, but I'm glad I'm here, and I can't wait to see all the other interviews that you'll do. Thank you for doing this, for real. This is making a difference too.
Thank you so, so much for being here. It's the whole goal of the Heart of the Artist was to have these conversations so that people can get to know you, who you are, what you're doing, and to give you space to make whatever social justice causes and actions you've got going on, to hopefully give that a little wider footprint, by giving you that opportunity to share. And your footprint is already just so beautiful. So it's like an honor to give space for that.
Thank you so much, Whisper.
Good dope. Catalyst, did you have any questions or anything you want to chime in? I've been so enjoying watching your facial expressions and body language this entire time.
I've been learning so much, like I'm just taking it all in. I don't really have any questions. You've answered questions that I didn't even know I had. And I just have so much gratitude to offer you. Thank you so much, Jane. It's been an amazing interview. Wow.
We have Martin, you're still in the room. TJ, you're still in the room. Would either of you like to make a comment or ask a question to our guest? Got a big thumbs up from Marquillian. who, by the way, is here every time. Thank you so much for doing that, sir. It means a lot. And TJ, you've been here every time too, I think. Thank you so much. So, all right. Well, any final words before we close it out, Shane?
Just keep going. That's it. It's incredible to me. I went through so many years of not wanting to be on this planet and trying my damnedest to take myself out. And I'm so glad I'm still here. So if you think that it can't get any better, I'm here to tell you, you don't know that for certain. You don't know that. So keep going.
Never give up. Well, guys, this is our show. Thank you so much. We've had an amazing time today. Please go to shanemaynard.com. Check out all of the wonderful things that she has going on, and www.guerrillapoets.com, GUERILLAPOETS. There's a donate button in there. And if you are so moved, please push it, because as you have heard, Shane and the GPs, of whom I am proud to say I am one, are doing awesome things, and lots of more good things to come. And if you have other causes you support, keep on doing it, because the world needs that love and light. Thank you. Peace and love.